2021. Appreciate you all being here. We've got joining us electronically, we've got councillors Ross, Hoekstra, and, I'm sorry, that's it electronically. Administratively, we have CAO Gowdy, Director Thompson, Coordinator Pettibone, and from our Financial Services Senior Manager Reyes, and Kathy Patrick is joining us as well. And that's in addition to those four of us here in council chambers. You notice that we are not wearing masks because of the size of this room and the distance we are apart. We're not required to. I understand. So, Chief Gowdy, if you would care to lead us into the presentations, please.
I certainly would. Thank you. This this evening we have a committee meeting focused largely on your utilities. As you know, that's been an area of focus for us and will continue to be over the coming years. And so we wanted to give you an update on some of the advocacy positions we are recommending for your two representatives on the Regional Solid Waste Commission, those being Councillor Hibbs and Mayor Creasy, as well as an opportunity to provide us some input on the utility bylaw, which we are currently reviewing and plan to bring an updated version later this summer. So there's a couple of items in that utility bylaw which Senior Manager Reyes is going to present to you as options that we're looking for direction. And then Director Thompson is going to go through recommended advocacy positions for the Solid Waste Commission representatives. I should maybe preface and apologize in advance for the utility bylaw, or sorry, the solid waste briefing. It is fairly technical because of some of the nature of some of the positions that we're recommending and the system that the commission has adopted for monetizing solid waste. However, we wanted to make sure that we were providing full information both to the representatives and to all of council, and an opportunity to ask any questions and make sure that there is clarity there. So certainly it is a high level of detail on that solid waste briefing, but there's simply no way around it. And we want to make sure that our members have the best information they can to make their positions at the upcoming meeting. So with that, it's to Senior Manager Reyes, I believe, first for the utility bylaw update.
Thank you, CAO Gowdy. Good evening, Council. Tonight, we are bringing a report to committee to ask for Council direction on a couple of issues. Number one is in regard to utility accounts. As CAO Gowdy mentioned, we will be bringing a report to council, an updated utility bylaw to council. And before we do that, we would like to get council direction on these two things. As I was mentioning, number one, utility accounts, whether we should continue to offer the choice of having utility accounts under both property owners and renters, or whether council would like administration to present the bylaw with utility accounts under property owners only. The second issue has to do with utility deposits. Currently, we have a utility deposit of $350. And at this time, we would like to ask council direction in regard to whether the utility deposit should continue at $350, whether we should be offering a reduced utility deposit, or whether we should be eliminating completely the utility deposit. Both issues are presented separately, but as you would see in the report, they are linked in some way. So I'm going to be highlighting a few items in my report, and I will be going briefly over the appendices. One of the things that I want to address right away is the fact that currently we oh, I'm sorry, my camera is not working. Let me. It's working
There you
now.
go.
Thank
you.
you, Chief Gowdy, for letting me know. So as I was mentioning, I would like to highlight a few items of my report, and after my presentation, we'll be happy to answer any questions. I would like to thank Cassie Patrick for attending this meeting. As all of you know, Cassie is our subject matter expert when it comes to utilities. Although she's no longer performing that role, she has done that role for a number of years. I believe it's over 8 years that she has been involved in utilities. So Kathy will have some of the answers that I may not have, and thank you, Kathy, for attending. So in regards to my report, the one thing that I would like to highlight is one of the issues that we are present currently is the fact that when it comes to collections can be a very time-consuming process. It takes approximately half of the total FTE to be following up on any collection efforts. So it is a very, very time-consuming process. There are approximately 881 utility accounts at any given point, and that represents about 18.5% of all the utility accounts. Every month, roughly, our admin staff has to deal with about 160 renters, and that's basically to discuss balances, make payments arrangements, negotiate terms, all those things. So that's where the half of FTE goes. We have to approximately hand out about 30 water shut-off notices every month. So that's another highlight that I want to mention that is in my report. Whenever we are unable to collect from renters, in some cases we are able to minimize the loss by applying the deposit, the utility deposit, to the balance that is owed on the account. But that's not always the case. And the reason for that is that currently renters have the choice of being able to pay the $350 deposit, or they may choose to simply enroll in the pre-authorized payment program. When they do that, they are not required to pay the $350. And if that is the case, we have nothing that we can use to offset the balance owing at that point. And one thing that I also want to highlight is the fact that if it has to do with financial hardship, residents in Lacombe have the ability to access services from Lacombe and district FCSS, but they have to meet a certain criteria in order to be able to access that. So in other words, not everyone would be able to qualify for that, but certainly some of the residents can. Now, the second issue, as I mentioned, that we want to address tonight would be the deposits. And in regards to the deposits, as I mentioned, we charge $350. What I want to highlight about the deposit, as I mentioned, is that we do not collect deposit for every renter. We only collect for $350 for those people who do not want to enroll in the pre-authorized payment program. Now, with the deposits, what we notice is that for some people it can be quite high to be able to pay $350 right up front when they open the account. So that may be something that council may consider tonight. We find that typically when renters enrolled in the pre-authorized payment plan, typically we don't have major issues in regard to collecting. Typically they do make the payments and there is no major issues. So perhaps one of the things that council may consider is combining the deposit, a reduced deposit, with the requirement to have the pre-authorized deposit. So that would be one of the options that council may consider. And finally, the council may decide not to charge any deposits on any accounts. This would likely be the case to, if council decides tonight to give direction to administration to have all accounts under property owners, then most likely the deposit will no longer be required. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about the appendices. As you can see in appendix number 1, we conducted some research among comparable municipalities. And as you can see, we have 11 municipalities in addition to the city of Lacombe listed. And from all 12 municipalities, including the city of Lacombe, there is only 3 that have both renter and owners that allow utility accounts to be open under either or. So that would be the city of Lacombe, city of Camrose, and city of Wetaskiwin. Everyone else would be property owners only. And because these 3 municipalities allow utility accounts to be open under either or, there is utility deposits. As you can see, the city of Lacombe is $350, city of Camrose and city of Wetaskiwin have a $300 deposit. Now, what I would like to mention about the next 2, those are the processes. So basically, what we are displaying on those 2 appendices is basically the process from when a resident opens a utility account to the time when a collection may occur or a transfer to taxes. So under the first one, which would be the appendix number 2, you can see what the process is for renters. One thing that I want to highlight on this is when the account becomes delinquent. What I want to mention about that is typically it takes time for the account to become delinquent, and the reason for that is if we think about a resident that opens an account on January 1st, let's say, and by the time they get their bill would be around February 9th, but they have a few days to pay their bill, right? So it would be around beginning of March when they pay it. So at the end, their account doesn't become delinquent just because of 1 month. It becomes in arrears. It actually becomes delinquent after 2 months that they haven't paid their bill. But the interesting thing is, by the time it becomes delinquent, there is another month that needs to be billed. So in other words, the account becomes delinquent, but there is 3 months actually that the utility owner or utility account holder would owe. And as you can see, there is a process that we have to follow to be able to, that leads to this connection. But that process also takes time to get there. So by the time we are able to disconnect the account or to be able to transfer it to the owner, if the owner agrees, is 4 months that we are dealing with. 4 months of utility billing. What it tells you is that if the average utility bill is 150, we would have approximately $600 owing on a typical account. And if we have $350 deposit, what it means is that we still have $250 that we are not able to collect. If they are enrolled under the pre-authorized payment plan, there is nothing that we can take. Basically, they would owe $600 and any penalties and any charges that would be applied to the account. So at the end of the day, what I want to mention is that there is nothing that we can do other than after all collection efforts that we have made, all we can do is send the account to collections. But by this time, we have tried really hard to collect. We have been calling them. We have been sending them notices and making any effort to collect. So that's our last resort that we have. Now, I would like to go into the final attachment of my report, which would be utility billing for owners. For owners, the process can be similar in some ways at the beginning, so that the account again becomes delinquent after 2 missed payments. And by then it's about 3 months, as I mentioned, that we will be dealing with. We send a letter to the owners and letting them know that they need to make payment arrangements. And if they do not do that, that their account will be transferred to taxes. So we let them know ahead of time. We make efforts for them to make payments, arrangements. If at the end we are not successful, we will be transferring that account to taxes. What I want to mention is, because by the time we are able to transfer to taxes, we actually have 4 months that we are dealing with in a similar way as the renter. So when we transfer to taxes, it'll be 4 months that we are going to be transferring. At that point, the account the utility account will go down to 0. They will not owe anything. But that balance actually is sitting now in their tax account. One of the challenges that happens at that point is that if they are enrolled in the TIP program for taxes, that transfer to taxes does affect their payments, and they need to be aware of that. So it is not a desirable situation either. But at this point, the city doesn't have to write off anything, because anything that goes to taxes is basically sooner or later we are going to be collecting that. And with that, I would like to open the floor to any questions that council may have for me or for Kathy, if it is something that I would have the answer for you.
Thank you, Senior Manager Reyes. In the report, it was referenced, I believe there was 1 in 5, more or less, of utility accounts are issued to renters. I was curious, what is the percentage of, I don't know what the all-encompassing term other than troublesome accounts, what percentage would be attributed to that same user group?
Sorry, so you would like to, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. In the report, it says close to 20%, 1 in 5 of our accounts are issued to renters. And you also referenced the issues around bill collection and delinquent accounts and that kind of thing. Do we have statistics that would indicate what portion of those, I'm going to call them time-consuming accounts, represent? Is it similar, higher, lower? What is it in comparison to the 1 in 5?
From discussions with our admin staff, they have indicated that the majority of the time is spent on rented accounts. And that is because the efforts to collect from them involve more steps and more time. Um, Therefore, I would say that it is mostly rented accounts that would create that amount of time that staff are spending on collections.
Thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I have a couple of questions. It mentions in here that there's 160 renters accounts that are regularly contacted to avoid water shutoff. Is that monthly?
Yes.
And every month?
That would be monthly. Yes, that's correct.
So that's on average 160 every month that they contact. And you talked about they go up to 4 months before they can proceed with collection. Is that something that policy is that set by us, or is that something that's come from somewhere else?
I believe it's in the bylaw that we states when the collection happens. So as I was mentioning, when the first month is not paid, the account becomes arrears, and then they have another 30 days to be able to make a payment. If they do not make a payment for that balance, and we have another bill going, then that's when the account becomes delinquent, and it is in the bylaw. So in reality, any collection efforts do not start until the account becomes delinquent, and that's why at the end of the collection period, it can be 4 months that we need to collect, assuming that they have made no payments at all.
So according to these numbers, can I continue?
Sure.
So we have about 100 accounts a year that we write off. Is that correct? Because there's like it's $35,000 goes to utilities write-offs, and I would assume then that we'd be looking at approximately 100 accounts then.
I don't know the exact number of accounts that we write off. It depends on the year. Kathy, would you have an idea on how many accounts do we write off any given year?
I would think that number is correct, like 75 to 100 accounts. They vary in amounts. Some are higher. If they've been a customer who's had a leak or a business that uses a lot more water, then they might owe thousands of dollars, where others might only be a couple $100.
Can I ask one more question?
Okay.
Sorry, Cora. Just a question on deposits. Is 350 our maximum?
350 is what we have in the bylaw as the utility deposit.
Is that for commercial also?
For commercial also, yes.
So it's not based on consumption then. So you could have a large consumer using $1,000 a month, say in utilities, and we charge them $350.
Yes, it would be the same deposit for both residential and non-residential customers.
Okay, would it not be advantageous to have it flexible, 350 the minimum, and then go up for larger consumers to avoid this much loss?
Actually, sorry, Marcio. Yeah, for commercial, it is $700.
Oh, it is
700.
Oh, sorry.
Because even that amount for some of the restaurants and so on, the larger consumers might not be enough. I would think a percentage might be better after you get above the 350.
Regardless of what that number is, any account holder can avoid paying that should they choose to sign up for the automatic withdrawal with the TIPS program. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, thank you. Councillor Hoopstrap?
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. So I guess my comment was going to be is that not all renters in our city are equal. Like we need to have a good sense of this, that when you're tasking a landlord to cover a residential utility account is one thing, but we're also talking about commercial properties where the landlord would be covering a fairly large utility account if it was in arrears. But my bigger comment would be about who is the utility provider here, and the utility provider is the city. And so the liability and the responsibility, in my opinion, lies with the city, not with the landlord. And yes, I know we look at all our comparator municipalities, but that doesn't mean that just because everybody else chose to make this their rule, that it's necessarily right for the city of Lacombe. And in my opinion, the city of Lacombe is the utility provider, and they should bear the responsibility of managing their utility accounts, not the landlords.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I guess my question sort of follows upon that idea. We are a little bit of an outlier as far as, that we have the system that we have. And I'm just wondering if anybody has any history as to like how that came to be. Were we always an outlier? Was everybody in this system before and they've slowly dropped off? I have a follow-up to that as well, but is there any insight in that regard?
Mayor Creasy, I don't have any history as to when the city of Lacombe made that change, or the town of Lacombe for that matter, if it were such. I can say that this has been an issue that has been raised by Senior Manager Reyes, and prior to him, Senior Manager DeBresser, and prior to him, Director Minchin, that they have brought this concept of the safety afforded to the municipality by putting it in owners' names as a desirable thing. And so over that time, I've actually seen the list of comparators when we've looked out to see who's allowing renters and who's allowing owners has shrunk. So I would say over the last 5 years, if you were to ask about trends, I think people are moving more and more towards only permitting utility accounts in owners' names. I think there's two sides there. One, it just is a better protection for the municipality. And so to Councillor Hoekstra's point, whose responsibility is it to provide this service? Well, definitely the municipality. I think most, whether they're private or public, what we're seeing is when utility companies, again, private or public, are given the opportunity to secure against taxes, they take that opportunity. Rightly or wrongly, there's just a natural inclination to offload risk onto other parties. In this case, the landlord would be the other party. I think the other thing that's different in the case of a municipality is that you often are in this spot where you are, for the sake of a $500 bill, potentially cutting off water to a resident that often is, a business is one thing, but the residents who truly face disconnection, when we get to that point, they are often showing signs of financial distress and personal distress in other areas of their life as well. And so when you're there and you're asking staff and your own organization to shut the water off to a resident, that is a very big step. Of course, water is a 100% necessity to life. These individuals have typically, not always, but typically chosen to prioritize other needs or desires in their life, and that's how they've gotten to this point. But nonetheless, it is a difficult thing, I think, to cut off utilities. Now, private companies do it all the time, so it's not to say that it can't be done or it's immoral or anything like that. But when you have this mechanism available to you, where you really do guarantee yourself almost 100% collection of all outstanding accounts, it's a very attractive mechanism. And so more and more municipalities, more and more of your comparators are choosing to make use of it.
Thank you. I think one other important differentiation when it comes to who should bear the risk and whatnot and who supplies the utility, a substantial difference between a municipality and a private supplier is that a private supplier has the factor of profit, which takes into account bad accounts and such. This is one of the factors. We work ours, utilities, on the basis of a cost recovery. So when the cost recovery fails, it's spread amongst the other users, which makes it inherently unfair for them to bear a higher burden for services of which they didn't receive. That's the big difference for me. I know it won't be favorably for property owners who choose to rent their properties to have this extra step, but obviously they have learned how to manage it in many other communities. So a big difference there. And I'm curious, when it comes to deposits and whatnot, in these other communities whereby it's strictly landowners, how is that risk mitigated for landlords? Do they charge a higher deposit on their properties? Are they allowed to do that? I know that it's not under our purview, but I'm just curious how that works. I think it's great that a landlord does have a more one-on-one direct input to the renter than say the city does over several thousand accounts. But I'm just curious how that would work, CAO Gowdy.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. You'll note that actually Senior Manager Reyes, after his memorandum, has a table there, and that actually the only other municipalities that allow renter registration for utility accounts do have deposits of a similar amount to us. So $300 in the city of Camrose, $300 in the city of Wetaskiwin. No other of your adopted comparators allow registration in the renter's name, and the risk becomes so minimal of non-collection that none of them then collect utility deposits.
Right, but in those cases in which happens to be the majority of the ones that are referenced on that graph, what is the impact on the renter themselves? Do they pay a higher deposit to their landlord, or do we not really know how that model works?
It would have to be, it would be managed by each landlord as to how they cover that rent. But yes, I think that has to be an acknowledged risk that you could negatively impact renter affordability if landlords choose to cover that risk by essentially maybe charging a little bit of a safety factor within the rent itself. So if the average use is $100, were I a landlord, I would probably look at something like saying it'll be $125 per month, and then I'll make sure to cover it. One thing that Senior Manager Reyes found when we reviewed our accounting system is that we are not in a position at this time to be able to send concurrent bills to both the landlord and the tenant. That would have been a desirable solution to make sure everyone's well aware of the water usage at the property. Unfortunately, that is not an option with the system we have.
Thank you.
I did have a follow-up, if that
Okay,
was, that I said that I did when I asked my first question.
Okay, we will come back to that right after Councillor Jacobson.
Okay, so a couple of things. So just to follow up on that last point, CAO Gowdy. So be clear, what you're saying is if the city switched to a system of only having the owner set up accounts, that it would not be possible that even if the liability is on the owner for the utility account to have duplicate bills sent to both the owner and the renter for that month. Is that correct?
That I would say that's largely correct. Of course, it is. I should say it's possible. It would be an incredibly manual exercise where we had to flag certain bills and then reprint them and have those. It would be very, very time consuming. It is not automatable under our current system.
So I would say to that then, because I have direct firsthand experience with this, having rental properties in some of these comparator communities. Up until you mentioned that, I was going to say this is really a non-issue, because how I've always dealt with it as a landlord is, yeah, you're responsible for the utilities, you know, go set up the account. And at for instance, say the Black Falls town office, say, no, it's in the landlord's name, but here you just sign this thing, we send you copies. You know, you have the ability to pay it. If you don't pay it, it's going to go to your landlord's tax account. And I've experienced that on occasion, but by and large, it's, you know, then I deal with that separately, but by and large, it's the same, right? So I would say that if our system is set up so that that can't be done, I would say that's a tremendous drag on the rental market here, for sure. If you're going to put landlords in the position of having to pay that and then collect, that's not a good thing at all. I would be so against that I would say I would vote strongly against that until that was rectified within our software, so that could be taken care of. I have zero problem at all. In fact, I strongly support the reasons why they should actually be collected from the landlord, for the reasons that the mayor described about how ultimately it's the burden of all the taxpayers right now to pick up the slack accounts because we have no profit margin. That's correct. But I think that would be far outweighed by the detriment to that if we were to go ahead with the current software as it is and not be able to very simply send duplicate bills to both addresses. So I don't know how onerous a task that would be to get that done. I don't know if that's a several $100,000 software upgrade or if it's simply a patch and a fix, but that would be something I would speak strongly in favor of.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs, we brushed over a follow-up question from you.
That was essentially my, yeah, that's okay. Never mind.
Councillor Hoopstra. And then Councillor Ross after that.
So thanks, Mayor Creasy. I guess I just would like to argue the point that the rest of the citizens unfairly have to carry the burden of these unpaid bills. That is the nature of a community, and that is the nature of our municipality. There's all kinds of citizens that are carrying the cost of a certain service, certain thing that happens in their community, and they may never access it, they may never have anything to do with it, but it is part of paying taxes to the overall municipality. So I argue that that is a reason to say that we're going to task a landlord to collect a utility when the landlord is not a utility provider. I still strongly oppose this. I do endorse, though, the idea that you know, that renters are encouraged to be on the, what was it, the direct deposit or the direct, whatever, the payment that comes out monthly from their bank account.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So as what was stated, obviously, for whatever number there is of a writing off certain X amount of dollars, which I guess if Manager Reyes would know that factor, I'd be curious to know for residents or administration how much the city is writing off, because really in essence, just to say, the taxpayers are subsidizing that, so the administration puts forth a balanced budget, that number has to be carried into forward. So I don't know, it's kind of a bit of a contentious issue. Does the average citizen want to pay or cover it through their taxes, other arrears, which all the respect to landlords, but landlord is for profit. So in my opinion, the utilities and or taxes is all based upon that property. So the landlord owns that property. The landlord is having that property for the purpose of profit. So just like Matthew Gowdy stated earlier, you put in a X amount of percentage of factor of the risk of losing that or to cover that. So that's probably a question here tonight. Are the citizens responsible for for making it up through their own taxes of the loss, or do we direct it in other ways? Thanks.
So just for clarity, Chief Gowdy, given that these utilities are on a cost recovery basis, we've had some reference to taxes making up shortfalls. Is that correct, or is it, or the shortfalls come through incremental rate increases?
So that, of course, that is correct, that it does come from taxpayers, the remainder of the taxpayers, but more directly, it comes from the remainder of the utility rate payers. So you're exactly correct. It is the other water users in this case who would end up picking up that unpaid approximately $35,000 per year. So Councillor Ross had asked the approximate amount. It's about 0.3% of our utility revenue, or $35,000 per year, that is carried by the remainder of your utility users.
Okay, and then in addition to that, as far as overall costs, the administrative time that goes into that in fact would come from taxation, or is that somehow factored into the utility as well?
Actually, that would be factored into the utility as well. It's a little bit more of a blunt instrument, but we do attribute 50% of the utility clerk's time to, I shouldn't say 50, I believe it's 35 to water, 35 to sewer, and 30% to solid waste, something in that ratio. But it is that position's time, and the wages and benefits associated with it are recovered from the utilities as well. So they are fed into the utility rates, not general taxation.
Thank you. Councillor Chronic?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I guess in thinking about this, I guess my concern is the accountability issue on two counts, both on usage and on cost. Right now, the renter is accountable for how much they use. My fear is if we dump that on the landlord, then the renter may just say, okay, or may feel that they can now use more water than they did in the past, because of course they're not seeing that bill. So they might be more apt to do a half load of laundry than a full load of laundry, for example. I'm just trying to picture this in my head. And even to cost now, they're, they don't have a true idea. They may go to the landlord and say, oh, I guess what, I can't pay that water bill this month. So the landlord picks up the bill in the hopes that he can recoup it next month from the tenant. All the while, though, chances are he won't. And so then that tenant, because he can't afford to kick the tenant out. I don't know, I'm trying to, it seems to me that if you're a renter, and the CL Gowdy alluded to this, there are renters who prioritize differently. And maybe instead of buying that case of beer, they should pay their water bill. I don't know, but I think you're taking that accountability piece out now by putting it onto the landlords. I guess, and I can appreciate that it's a very onerous thing to do for the city to track down these accounts and chase after people. I get that. I guess I'm more curious to follow up to Councillor Jacobson's comments about what they do in other communities. It sounds like in Black Falls, the renter is still charged and the landlord sees the bill too, or I guess I'm just trying to envision how it works a little bit in other communities. Could you answer that, Councillor Jackson?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, and it's not just Black Falls, it's like Clive, Red Deer, like they can all do this. So it's just very simple. When the tenant goes down to set up the account, they set up the account for them, but they have some sort of administrative procedure where it's acknowledged that it's ultimately the owner who is responsible. And so, but they give them all, so the billing does still go to the tenant at the address. It's just that a copy gets sent to the landlord every month as well too. And so the landlord can then see, when the bill comes next month, that there's a balance owing, that it's not being paid. So then the landlord, that's my experience, you contact the tenant saying, hey, what's going on, right, kind of thing. So the landlord becomes the collection agent then, right? Because obviously the landlord knows that, it's ultimately going to get transferred to his tax bill if he doesn't do that, right? So yeah, it does it is definitely a way of offloading collection responsibility onto the landlord for sure, right? But yeah, but from the landlord's perspective, there's no additional paperwork. You don't have to go down to the, you know, town office or city office and fill out a bunch of stuff. It acts, the logistics are the same as in the city of Macomb here. It's just that you have that extra liability in case they don't pay at the end of the day.
See, and see, today, that makes sense to me. If we can follow that type of model, I'd say, okay, I'd be more apt to support that. But if it's simply a case of where the tenant isn't being held responsible at all, and it's simply just going straight to the landlord, then I have an issue with that. So I'm curious in that model, and if that's a model we can copy, great. If we can't, then I'm not sure I want to go down this road.
So the nice part about that very model is that you remove the what can be a burdensome amount for the deposit by the renter, and you transfer that risk ultimately to the property owner, whereas in fact the utility is being consumed. So I think that certainly warrants some further investigation. Chief Gowdy, are you aware at this point in time if in fact that dual billing or whatever we want to call it is in fact not possible with the current software? It's current with some additional work. What is the situation there?
So I will have to defer to Senior Manager Reyes. He was the one directly in contact with our software provider to check about the capabilities. So I guess if you could give us some more information, that'd be good.
So my understanding, yes, thank you, Mayor Creasy. My understanding is that the issue of generating 2 paper bills is what right now we can't do. However, my understanding is that if we set them up for e-billing, we can have 2 email accounts, and if that is the case, as long as they don't go for paper billing, we would be able to send to I guess to the owner and the renter. But I'm going to ask Kathy if she can confirm that is accurate or whether it's a bit different. Kathy?
Thanks, Marcio. Yes, it is possible to have more than one person on an e-bill account, so they would have to go online and set up the online account. When the bills are processed, each of them would be able to have a email sent to them notifying them, and even having a PDF copy attached so that they could see the bill. We also have extra address on our account, so even though the account stays in the owner's name, we could put the bills into, like, have the renter's name on a bill and mail it to a different address. And if notices were to go out, they would go out to the owner on the account.
Thank you for that. So does that seem like a likely scenario that is in other communities, that you receive notification electronically, or is it an actual physical piece of paper? Or do you see the difference between the two as being preferable? Councillor Jacobson?
No, communication is fine. I'd like to, something else to point out too, that in almost all cases, the rent deposit you collect from your renter as a landlord is in excess of what's collected by the utility bill. So, if you're collecting, if you're getting a monthly statement showing those arrears that are piling up as a landlord, you can communicate to your tenant, hey, you gotta get this cleared up, otherwise you're in violation, and that's gonna be deducted out of your deposit, right? So there's actually, in practice, there's a lot more cushion for that as a landlord than even there is with utility bonds with the city, and that actually reduces the burden of the tenant to come up with a deposit for both rent and for the utility. So all in all, if we can migrate to that system that's described, it's not bad at all. It's actually pretty good.
So it's not like the landlords have necessarily increased their deposit amount to include an additional amount equivalent to what the city has here.
No, it's just they adjust their contracts to state that, you know, arrears and utility accounts constitutes default in a rent contract, and same as, so it falls into the same status as missing rent payments and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. A couple of questions. The one, 10 properties per year shut off for non-payment? Is that's in the document here? That seems extremely low to me. Then that number is like 10 per year on that number of accounts seems to be very low. I'm just wondering if we need to be more aggressive. I know that's a hard job to do. I mean, I did it and I understand it. And one of my other concerns with the water, to be honest with you, if it's in the owner's name, would they have the ability to turn it off on their tenant? If they requested it to be shut off, would we have to do it?
Yes, if the account was in the owner's name, they can come in. We've had that happen before where people don't put the utilities into their own name when they've rented a property, and the owner will use that as leverage to get them to pay their bill or pay their rent. But they do have to come and do a temporary disconnection with the city. So they are taking responsibility for the fact that the water is being shut off.
So the owner could use that as a leverage to get the tenant out of the property then if they wanted to? Even if they weren't in the arrears?
They can, yeah, that is up to them to shut that off. And then I think a lot of that would fall more under the Landlord and Tenant Act.
I have a concern. One of the other one is okay to continue, is regarding renters and the discrimination of this in a way, as far as the individuals go. I know when I was involved with utility, people used their utility payments and the credit rating that they built up as a way of, you know, proving to banks or lenders that they were lower risk. So I think that not allowing tenants to have it in their name is a little bit discriminatory also.
So just out of curiosity then, do we have banks wanting to contact the city to provide financial information on payment, non-payment of accounts now?
Not from banks, not very often, but I have had people ask me for a letter of recommendation to a different utility company.
Thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Excellent questions and comments. But I guess I want to echo a little bit what Councillor Connick and Councillor Gullickson are saying is about the rights, or the, you know, that having renters actively involved with their utilities so that they know what they're consuming, and that they are not at the mercy potentially of their landlord. That would be my comment. But my question is back to Councillor Jacobson. So I understood your example as saying that the utility account was still with the tenant, with the renter, but the liability of that account went to the property owner. So the account was with the tenant and they had to pay, but if they were behind in payments, then it would go to the tax account of the landlord. Is that correct? I guess I heard you say that the tenant still went to City Hall and set up an account.
Sure. We'll get Councillor Jacobson. Could you please reiterate that scenario for us?
Sure. No, so I believe on the book of whatever municipality it was, whichever tenant I had, the account was always in the name of the landowner, but they had an administrative mechanism where, you know, a renter comes in, the renter shows their contract that they have to rent, like you would in getting a post office box or anything, and they have, okay, well, you know, here's your, whenever you fill this out, and you're now going to be getting a copy of the bill, the exact same bill that's being sent to the landlord, right? So they still have the exact same engagement on what they're spending, the whole 9 yards. They can then set up that bill payment within their online, bill payments or pre-authorized debit, whatever it's going to be, just the same as a landlord. It's just basically they're just getting a dual copy, that's all. So conversely, then the landlord also gets a copy of that and can see if he or she wants to pay attention whether or not their tenant is making the payments. And again, what tends to happen is you see if it's being built up over 2 or 3 months, as the landlord, you're the one who's going to call the tenant and say, hey, what's going on, you're going to have to clear this up because otherwise I'm going to have to, and then it's, but again, as I mentioned, there is, again, I don't want to advocate against landlords because I am one, but the truth is they tend to be more effective collection agents than city staff, I would imagine, so, yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councilor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. First of all, I think having other emails for communication of the account is an excellent back to the landlord. I think just as Councilor Jacobson just alluded to, I think that landlords could be better or more persistent collectors, and it would be out of the hands of administration. Another comment was, can administration, for example, just like Manager Reyes stated that, for example, if you get a January bill the 1st of February, you really don't have to pay it to the end of February, and then before you know it, you're into March. But anyways, is there by the MGA, can you only place it on the tax account within X amount of days, or can you shorten that time period? So with email notice to the landlord, if it's not paid within X amount of days, that it automatically goes to the tax account. So hopefully there's less administration to the city of Lacombe to have to chase a delinquent account. Would that be more efficient, or?
So I don't know that there's necessarily a correlation between adding it to their tax roll account any sooner. That is merely there as a mechanism for a backup in the event that the amount does remain delinquent over a longer period of time. Is that correct? CAO Gowdy?
Yes, that is correct. I don't think the MGA actually has specific timelines unless Senior Manager Reyes is aware of them. I believe that is up to the jurisdiction of the Alberta Utilities Commission and or the Municipal Government Board. But I know it is fairly, the timeline that we have is very similar to what other municipalities would have for the same process.
Anything to add to that, Manager Reyes?
No, I would agree with CEO Gaudi's comments. From what I recall, the MGA doesn't really tell you when, but it allows you to transfer to taxes. One thing that I can mention is when we bill, we have to for sure allow sufficient time for payment. And typically that is, it can be about 3 weeks roughly that we allow for payment, which seems to be a reasonable amount of time based on what other municipalities do as well. And as I mentioned, when the first month is not paid, it's actually in arrears, and it's only delinquent until they have missed 2 payments. And that's when collection really starts. But because it takes time to get to that point, it can be, as I mentioned, 3 months and then 4 months at the end. So the process is time consuming for sure.
Thank you. Councilor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So we're talking about 20% of the renters are in arrears. Is that correct? Approximately. Obviously, they're not all in arrears. So notification would go to the landowners of the ones that are in arrears only. Is that correct? Instead of the ones that are paying regularly, they don't need to know that if their bills are being paid. Is that the way we would do it if we did it?
I think that's what's being discussed now.
Yeah, yeah.
The methodology that's being
So,
put forward by Councillor
right,
Jacobson suggests that notification of
Of a collection.
payment, not of a collection, of a payment, and the account standing is forwarded to the account holder, which would be the landowner.
so would you need to know every month if it's being paid good? Well, you don't need to know, right?
Well, you just see it because you receive the bill every month.
Right.
You can see, you know, if as you see on your regular bill, if it was paid the previous month,
But
you know that it's being covered.
I'm just thinking if our system cannot be adjusted for whatever reason, I think it should be able to. If it can't be, could it just be dealt with the ones that go into arrears? Because you're not gonna be, as a landowner, you're not gonna be able to react or won't react, I would hope, until the third month anyway. Right? Because I mean, you're one billing and then you're into you miss it and then you're into your third billing again. So that's when notification would come from the city to say you have a problem here and you need to address this.
I think there's other advantages to having them have a notification of the bill. Well, if they can monitor consumption
Absolutely.
as well.
Absolutely.
See if things are awry.
But we,
At the worst case scenario, the landowner deletes an email. What's the problem with that? I'm not sure what the.
oh, I'm just saying that they've talked about it being a big issue as far as getting notification out of all the utilities. I'm just thinking if the ones that are in the rears are the only ones that we're notifying the landowners of, then that makes it a little easier if the system can't do it on its own. If we can't double produce bills or send an email every month to 881 accounts saying that they paid.
I think that we heard from Kathy that in fact, I think that is a possibility to send it electronically. So I don't know that it's a big issue. So I guess it was what I was getting at.
Oh, okay. I thought that it would be a problem with 881 accounts.
I think if the system can do it, I don't think it's a problem.
It's not.
If 20 or 2 million, if it can do it. But that's something that, from what I'm hearing by the majority of people, is it would be naturally be preferable to minimize the city's losses. And it would be nice to minimize staff time spent on account related items like this. And I think that we can come up with a way through this notification process that both keeps the account holder, which in fact would be the landowner, in the loop as to the bills. Therefore, they can monitor consumption and whether or not the account is being handled properly and being paid up, rather. I would like to see some sort of a system like that, and would look forward to seeing if in fact we can implement such a system as was outlined by Kathy earlier. Does that seem reasonable to the council? Or
If they're doing it in other communities, no reason why we can't follow suit and follow a similar model. I don't see why not, for sure.
Chief Gotti.
I think if it is council's wish that that be pursued, we can definitely do so. And I'm confident we can find a solution that provides notification, suitable notification for both tenants and landlords. And we'll bring a first draft that contemplates the first draft of the bylaw that contemplates utility accounts in owners' names, provided that we're able to develop a suitable solution, which I have confidence we can.
Thank you for that. I think I also like the idea that it reduces the burden on renters in the fact that they will not have to have for residential, is it $350 in our case, a $350 deposit. I think that would certainly be advantageous. And by keeping the landowner who is ultimately responsible for their property in the loop, I think we kind of thread the needle down the middle here to make it not too onerous amongst anyone. and also remove the extra accounting costs and collection costs that the city bears from some of the accounts currently. So unless council has any objections to having administration pursue that type of a model, that is what I would see as being a reasonable compromise. Certainly, if there's any of those factors that you don't like, let's hear them. Councilor Gullikson.
Thank you. I just would like to repeat my thoughts that we shouldn't say that renters can't have utilities in their name. I think that's important for them. It's a small percentage, and I know collections are extremely difficult, but the numbers of people we turned off for non-payment is extremely low, 10, which I think is way too soft. Should have been much higher than that. So to get stop the bleeding and be more aggressive on our collections.
So just so I can understand, then the justification for that is because renters need to have this letter of, I'm not finished, to have this letter of intent from a utility provider so that they can use for credit purposes elsewhere. For a lot of reasons, that's one of them. But I mean, it's never. I'm not sure you'd get away with, as a private utility, for example. I don't know if you'd ever get away with that. Which is fine with a private utility.
Yeah, I understand that too. I'm just saying my feelings. That's all.
Sure. No, but is there some other reasons as to why?
I think part of it is just in some cases the landlords will use it as a tool, like I expressed my concern with. I think you'll see a lot more than 10 of those people being turned off by the landlords. I mean, it's been attempted. I've had experienced that myself where they've attempted to use that as a way of getting people out of the properties. So.
And I'm sure that the conduct and behavior of landlords is governed by the Tenancy Act. I don't know if that's necessarily. It might be a concern of ours, but it's not necessarily under our purview. But valid enough points. Councillor Jacobson?
Yeah, I just want to speak to that point that Councillor Gullikson made. This is a good one, but in this particular case, there wouldn't be any difference in impact to tenants using the utility bills for their credit because the city of Macomb, none of the, in fact, no utilities other than telecommunications report directly to the credit bureaus on a monthly basis. They only report if there's collections or they're in arrears. I'm not even sure if the city reports the collections. They might refer delinquent bills to collections. I'm not aware of that. But in fact, how a tenant or renter or anybody for that matter uses utility bills for credit reestablishment or for credit purposes if they're trying to get a loan or a mortgage is in fact what they have to do. And I deal with this all the time, so I know this in point of fact. They simply have to provide 12 months bank statements and then the corresponding utility bills that made those payments. So this would have zero impact on that because in point of fact, if they were just getting a copy of their bill and they were paying it out of their account or it was pre-authorized payment, that would have the exact same positive effect on their credit establishment as if the account were actually in their name as well too. If in fact this was the system we were going to go to, where there's just dual bills sent out and the tenant pays it directly.
They would accept that even though it's not in their name.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
because
if I'm paying your bill, then I can use that as a credit reference.
Well, in this particular case, it's because they're paying a water bill, right? And this and the bill states on them, copy sent to this tenant or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what it's the purpose of reestablishing or establishing credit is simply to determine whether or not this is a responsible person who has a monthly bill and they're making that payment, right? So yeah. And again, I know because I've done this literally with tenants buying houses from me, that they're renting in Black Falls where we send in all of those bills, right? So that's how it works.
Well, that's something different than when I was involved with the billing. That I don't think they would have allowed it at that time.
Yeah, it's because, again, any person looking for this is gonna understand that if there's a rule from the utility provider that this bill can't be in your name for this reason, well, then we understand why this is being paid, right?
See, that addresses that problem.
I think also for the handful of people who've chosen to have letters of reference for their account payment in a timely manner that Kathy referenced, there would be no reason why that could not be done should we choose to move to this, what are we going to call it, a hybrid system or whatever anyway. So that might pick up the slack for those few that wouldn't work for as well. Anyone else? Chief Gotti, are you clear with the direction that we would like to pursue at this point then?
Yes, I believe I am clear. We'll be bringing back a first draft that has this as the option once we've determined the best way to make sure we're providing notification to both landlords and tenants of the billing and the billing amount. I just want to specify that doesn't necessarily mean that change will be made. Council will have another chance to review that with the utility bylaw, 3 readings of the utility bylaw. But that's how we're going to proceed is just based on the discussion tonight, committee meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. Any burning questions we need to touch on before we move on to the next item? Very good. Next, please. Chief Gotti, was Senior Manager Reyes handling the next item then?
No, sorry, I had a question just on the deposit. Are we keeping the deposit at 350, or do we make any changes to the deposit for residents, and I guess for commercial?
I think at this point in time, I do not see any changes being likely until because it's too dependent on what's presented on the system as we hope it may be. Does that make sense? I don't see that being fruitful this time to change a portion of the existing system. Because if in fact we move to the system how we are envisioning it to work, that is going to remove the need for deposits on, I would expect, the vast majority of accounts. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right. Next item, please, Chief Gotti.
The next item is being presented by Director Thompson. So I will turn it over to him to highlight some recommended positions on the solid waste system.
Thanks, CEO Gotti and Mayor and Council. This item follows up on Council's previous direction to advocate for changes with the Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission coming out of the city's solid waste review in June 2020. As a brief reminder, the changes the city would like to see are the commission conducting an audit to determine if it should move away from a per capita requisition model to a weight-based model, and 2, to advocate for the city to receive diversionary credits for the source separated yard and garden waste it diverts from the commission, like it does for the city's recyclables program. Both of these items were discussed at length during the previous council presentations, so I'll keep my summary tonight brief. Detail in the report to committee is meant to provide the city's representatives primarily on the Lacombe Regional Waste Services Commission with additional supporting rationale to make an informed argument for the changes that are supported by the City of Lacombe Council. It is also meant to provide council as a whole insight into the complexity of the issue. However, it's important to recognize that the city only has 2 of 8 votes on the commission board, so it alone cannot direct the commission to make these or any changes. However, what is in the city's favor is that the commission manager has already brought forward for discussion conceptual changes to the commission's rate structure in August of 2020, and his reports are attached to the my report before council tonight. But a decision has yet to be made on them. The commission manager has indicated to me that the proposed changes will return to the commission board for consideration in April. At this point, I will open it up to any questions from council, and if Councillor Hibbs or Mayor Creasy wish to discuss this report to committee in more detail separately, I'm happy to support you in any way I can.
Thank you. So just as a brief background, both of these items have been discussed at the Home Regional Commission on it, discussed on several occasions and voted on relatively recently, within the past year for sure. I believe I'm correct in saying that. What new information or different path do you envision us taking to be more successful in either regard than what we were previously?
I would say that the with the commission manager bringing forward 3 proposed changes to the commission's rate structure is a bit of a change on the commission's end, that the administration anyway is open to reviewing alternative rate structures. And when I spoke to the commission manager, he did indicate that those items were coming back for consideration in April. And so included in the report is a direct rationale for how the city's position regarding the weight-based model and the diversionary credits issue can be further supported in response to the commission manager bringing forward those items. And so are they different advocacy strategies? Perhaps not, but certainly there is more ways. It provides different ways in which the commission members can continue to keep the city's interests at the forefront of the commission's discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Yeah, one topic specifically, which was the tipping fees, was put off. We had discussed it. Yeah, I don't believe you were at that meeting. And so that was, we didn't want to, the recommendation from administration was not to change it. I obviously took issue with that, as did a few of the other commission members. We couldn't really come to a consensus at that time and thought that it would be better, because the decision didn't have to be made at that point, just because of the way the time frame was, that it would be advantageous to wait until it was closer to budget time and make that decision again, so that there was more time to gather some information, et cetera, et cetera. So that's that one specifically. Our tipping fees are quite low in comparison to other, commissions, I guess, for lack of a better word. So that is definitely one that I'm sure we'll both be seeking to have addressed. So I think I would like to take up Director Thompson's suggestion that we perhaps meet prior to that April meeting, just so that we can have a good fulsome discussion without having to, belabor it here at a committee with all of council. I would put that to Mayor Creasy as to whether he would agree with that, but I definitely would find that to be beneficial.
No question about it. I just wanted to have a complete overview of how we expect this round to go differently than what it did previously. It was not.
I think in particular, with that specific item, I think that we could make some headway presenting a very strong argument, because just looking at the dynamics of the commission, I think that there was some bite on that one in particular. So.
And I think there was certainly a full acknowledgement on behalf of the commission at that time that the tipping rates were askew with area providers. So I think there's going to be some adjustment there, and that was at our the November 26th meeting, perhaps.
I think, yeah, I believe
That
so.
was, yeah. Okay. Councillor Ross?
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. I would assume the city of Lacombe is one of the, probably, it's, sorry, I don't have the numbers in front of me, the higher contributors to the total volume tonnage of Lacombe Regional Solid Waste. Okay, the city is involved to the point of picking up as a service provider to the citizens the solid waste and it being on our trucks, which is obviously freight. Should it not be a responsibility of, as we as council or administration to seek out other options or destinations, whether costs into investing into a compactor or going to waste management in Red Deer, because obviously with the vast amounts of other options that are in of names of other companies on the dumpsters throughout the commercial part of Lacombe, obviously then Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority and or the city of Lacombe providing their service is not competitive. So would it not be worthwhile for us to seek other options for other destinations other than Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority and or Meeting Creek? So why are we so tied to the solid waste, Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority if there's other options out there?
Certainly that would be a significant change in our service model as it is now, and one that would affect a lot of our regional partners. But if we feel that there are significant cost savings to be realized, that is something that we may want to look into. I think that does not have to be a particularly onerous exercise. I find it hard to believe that we're going to find any significantly cheaper alternatives, but that's certainly something that we could look at just to double check that in fact we're getting decent value for our money. I think you're 100% right that a lot of these commissions that we're involved in, we are a significant percentage of the input, whether it's on water, wastewater, or solid waste. So whatever we can do to keep our costs down is something that we ought to explore. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. This is not a follow-up to Councillor Ross. This is more to do with what we're discussing tonight here on these two issues. I was curious if it's either or on these issues, because if we go by weight, we in essence will experience the credit because we won't be having all the yard waste in the trucks. So is it either or? Are we going for both? These two issues.
Certainly from my perspective, it is. I think the advocacy on making these changes is a long game. It will probably take some time of continual advocacy efforts of the members to make these types of changes come to fruition. So in the interim, you're right, Councillor Hoekstra, that if there was a flip to a change to a weight-based system, that in fact removes the need for a diversionary credit at all, because any amount of weight that we are diverting from the landfill saves the city money. However, I think that there is already a system in place that accounts for diversionary credits, and that the principles of the diversionary credit that are outlined in by the Regional Solid Waste Commission, in our view, means that the yard and garden waste should also be included in that formula calculation. And so I would say that it is, far from an advocacy perspective, it shouldn't be an either or, it should be both, with the understanding that I would think that the easier one to make the change on would be the diversionary credit item, and then continue to make the issue an important one for the board on the weight-based system item.
So perhaps you could just clarify for me, are we somehow under the impression that the city of Lacombe stands to gain financially by the diversionary credits generated from the, what I'm going to term green waste, the yard and garden waste, disproportionately so to other communities? Is that the general theory behind that item?
Well, the city of Lacombe certainly has a system in place with its green bins throughout the city that separates grass and garden waste that is unlike other members. And so that volume, if we were right now, as just council is well aware, costs the city an amount to truck and dispose of, and we don't receive any credit for that. And so is it going to offset our costs fully? Well, in the case of the disposal costs for the green waste, it might, since we have a great contract there. But the it is about a principle, and it is about the idea that we are genuinely disposing of material and putting effort toward or diverting material from the solid waste stream that would otherwise end up in the compactor at the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Commission facilities, which would then have to be transferred and trucked up to Dry Mead Lake. And so the city's efforts are genuinely reducing the costs of the commission, and that is in principle, on a basic level, the calculation formula for the diversionary credit in the first place. And so it should be the city's position to advocate for the yard and garden waste to be included in that formula.
Thank you. The reason I ask that is that would lead us to believe that somehow other communities are contributing green waste to the waste stream, thereby increasing costs. Would be the justification for that. And I was informed by Mr. Hahn, the commission manager, that in fact that does not seem to be the case. That there is not a particularly significant amount of green waste that is being transported to West Dry Mead Lake from the other members. So obviously they are doing something with the green waste, whether or not it's as formal as what we have or not, that I don't know. So I think we need to be careful what it is that we're asking for here. I would hate to change the system that we have and not see an improvement. Councilor Craddock.
Thank you, Mayor Christie. First off, I just want to thank you both for your efforts on this commission. I know this is something that you guys have been working on for a while, and like everything, it takes time, unfortunately. I do, my hope is that the 3 conceptual changes outlined here will take place. I'm just curious, you mentioned, Councilor Debs, a little bit that there was some back and forth on the tipping fees yet, but is there an appetite by the commission as a whole to move to a weight-based system? Is that, what's your sense of that? Or is that?
I would suggest that was not viewed as a particularly advisable model at this point. There's some rather significant costs that go into all the satellite stations and whatnot for the weighing and the administration that's involved with that. So providing the new processes to do that. Is that the impression you were left by the majority of the members?
Yeah, I would say twofold. Primarily the initial, I mean, that's going to cost money just to do the upgrades to all the sites. Of course, you have to do it at all the sites, not just one. The other one is that I honestly think the other communities are probably thinking, what's in it for me? What's the point? What's the benefit, right? So
So all of the three, if I may follow, so all of the three changes that are being proposed here, is there any of them that have any legs that you think will take place at this point, or no?
Yes, I think so. I would say, the third-party contractor tipping fees, I think, is definitely one that could be one. Levy disposal charges on business directly, that's something that's being looked at. So there's promise there. Diversionary credits, I guess we'd have to have more discussion on that. That one I would say is an unknown. I don't know if your opinion on that is different, but.
No, certainly with the contractor tipping fees, I think the justification for that was, it was felt it was unfair to adjust those costs partway through the year, through the cycle, because the third parties that were providing the services that would fall under these third-party contractor tipping fees have got contracts in place. Therefore, we were wanted to come up with an appropriate way to advise them of changes. I would suggest there was not an unwillingness to adjust them, quite the opposite. We want them to be more in line or closer to surrounding centers.
Partially, but there was a hesitation, given that it's tough economic times. There was a few voices that were adamant that why do we want to make it harder for small business by increasing their costs? So there was that, and I'm not sure that that would be any different coming up with the discussion coming up as it was then, but I think that was a relative minority. I think it was more the reason that it was getting tabled for Mayor Creasy's reasoning, so yeah.
Councillor Godson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So the increasing the small businesses, that's only in Lacombe, correct?
No, that would be like anybody that's coming as a third party to drop off at any of the transfer stations, but.
But are they not already paying for that to be done in the other communities? Are we not the only ones that collect our own garbage within the commission? The others are all contracted.
I believe that's correct.
So the only one that is affected is us. The others are not, because they're already paying for that contractor to pick up that garbage.
I suppose, but there still would be private, like even in areas.
Why would they have, I don't know if they would have that. I know here we're about 30%, is that correct, Jordan? Are collected by private providers, and we are about 70% by the city for commercial. Is that about right?
Well, I think it's, I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but certainly I think it's higher than that for the private sector.
Higher than that. So in Lacombe, we're losing that revenue. Is that not correct? On the commercial side, on all those 40% or 30%, whatever that number is.
Correct. Correct. Okay. And the disposal cost from the commission is a fixed number essentially. And so if we're not able to offset that revenue from the commercial sector, it's the residential sector that is bearing those costs.
Right. So in the other communities, if they got a different provider, would they be able to opt out of that, the town side of the garbage collection, the same as they do here? So like if they got waste management instead of whoever is doing the town of Black Falls, for example, if they got somebody else, would they be able to opt out of the system?
So I think the member municipalities agree through the commission's bylaws to participate in the commission, and those bylaws govern the operation and the funding of it. And so there is an exit clause in the bylaws that allow a municipality to leave, I think with 2 years notice. And so with that in mind, yes, any member.
I think you're missing my point, is that just individual businesses, for example, like in Black Falls, if they don't take waste management as their supplier or their garbage collection, they have somebody else, they stop paying Black Falls for that collection? Like right now, they can opt out of the commercial collection here in Lacombe, correct?
Yes, businesses can select, and that is
Yes.
that is a City of Lacombe, I guess, policy decision in its bylaw to do that. That other municipalities can make different decisions on how they want to treat commercial customers.
Okay, so we may be the only ones within the commission that have that issue? We don't know that for sure, though.
I don't know that for fact, but certainly
Yeah,
I believe that is true.
So all we need to have is tipping fees on the commercial garbage leaving Lacombe, and then we would be okay at the site. I mean, as far as balancing it out.
Well, that would be the weight-based system that we're advocating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that would apply to the entire county and all of the sites as opposed to just that from the city.
Yeah, you'd have to apply it to everybody, of course, but.
Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. So I'm assuming now when these City of Lacombe garbage trucks goes to Prentice, that they pull on the scale and our tonnage is calculated and tracked how much comes from the city. But if a private contractor in Lacombe picks up commercial waste, do they not follow that same process? Are they weighed in and then charged by the ton that they dump off at, for example, Prentice? From, for example, Waste Management, Phantom, or whoever it may be that's picking up from commercial or private business.
Sure. So yeah, there's a couple things there. So if a private hauler were to drive over the scales and they are bringing in what's called compactor waste, like MSW, household waste type thing, they are not charged if they're from the City of Lacombe. They are deemed to be a part of the requisition rate. However, if they're bringing in rubble, which is a different type of material that will stay in Prentice, will stay at the landfill there, they are charged $40 per ton right now. The commission does charge a per capita rate, but if you were to look at that in terms of what is the city charged divided by how much weight we bring in any given year, it works out between $110 per ton, $180 per ton, depending on how you do that calculation. And the commission doesn't distinguish between what is rubble and what is compactor waste from the City of Lacombe. So for instance, if the City of Lacombe truck were to bring rubble, it is not charged a lesser rate than a private hauler. And so because all the members are being charged a uniform rate that could be estimated on a per ton basis, I think it would be fair to say that anyone driving across the scales that is being charged should be charged that same rate. But and I think that's where Councillor Hibbs is saying the members are that's gaining some traction with the members, and I think that would probably be one of the more stronger arguments to make. But sorry, Councillor Ross, I'm not sure if I fully answered your question.
If I may continue, my apologies. So really, it's either, to be fair to all those, it's not really fair when you start comparing residential that's paying by the ton, that's calculated across the whole city by residents. So really, you need to change the bylaw so that commercial doesn't have an option, because it's unfair that a private contractor is not being charged tipping, because basically they're dumping it on the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste, and the partners throughout the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority are paying for those not paying for any tipping fees. So yeah, really have two choices. You change the bylaw so that businesses don't have the option, so you regain that business, and then it's in fairness with residential compared to the commercial. Or if they don't get that change of the authority to charge by tonnage, then the next option is to change the bylaw, that because it's an unfair competition that really private contractors are providing, because they're not paying, period. So change the bylaw and simplify it so you don't have to deal with the Regional Solid Waste Authority, And administration doesn't have to deal with the ongoing battle of who gets charged what. And fairness, just change, in my opinion, changing the bylaw would be simpler for administration, Macomb Regional Solid Waste Authority, and everything. What happens within the boundaries of the city of Macomb is within our administration's control.
Chief Gotti.
So that would be a solution from a governance sense. Logistically, there are a lot of businesses within the city who have layouts or solid waste management needs that the city cannot service with our current equipment. So many of the customers that we've lost, actually, it's not even the cost isn't the primary driver. It's about what service can be provided by the city. And so if you think some of our larger users at the end of their service with us were facing these situations where they would have 10 or even a dozen of our garbage bins on site because we would only collect the one size of bin. Where with a contracted service, they can have a single large bin. If you go out to the Midway Center there, he's got new bin styles that are largely below ground. They're kind of like an iceberg style, if you will. And so our current equipment just does not have the ability to collect that kind of receptacle. It's not to say that we couldn't, but there would be some costs involved there would either be costs involved in us getting new equipment to provide the service that some of the commercial customers have come to expect, or some significant disruption for some of those businesses and potentially cost implications when we force them to switch to our system that is much less flexible than some of the commercial contractors are able to offer right now for collection.
Director Thompson.
Yeah, and to I guess augment or expand on C.L. Gowdy's point, the way we would, I guess we have to look at that, but the way we would probably have to do that is to bring in a commercial contractor that is a city under the umbrella of the city of Lacombe to provide service to the commercial sector that does have the array of equipment that can support the needs of our commercial businesses. But it would be under the umbrella of the city of Lacombe. So they get a city of Lacombe bill. The city of Lacombe would manage the costs internally. And to Councillor Ross, your point, it would be under the control fully of administration on where those costs are spread out between the commercial and residential sector under that formula.
With the idea if it was a more focused pool of contractors, it would be easier to control at the Prentice side, as opposed to having a whole bunch of different companies that we're not necessarily 100% sure what its origin is and that type of thing. Is that what I'm understanding?
If we could bring, if we were to take back the option of commercial contractors or commercial businesses going directly to private haulers, and they all become customers of the city of Lacombe, the city of Lacombe can choose to deliver that service to those customers either through its own forces or through a private contractor. But by them becoming customers, then the city has much more flexibility in where it is allocating its disposal costs or its bill from the commission. So it can say, it can not just put it all on the residential customers and the small portion of commercial customers it currently has. It is a much larger pool that it can spread that out across, because either way, under the current system, it doesn't matter the actual weight or the number of customers. It's only the population of the city that creates that bill. And so the more people we can spread that across, the cheaper it is for residential customers.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. Is it possible to change the commercial billing on the solid waste to have a base fee for the transfer station, so that doesn't ever go away, even if they have a private contractor that picks up their waste?
Certainly that is possible. There would have to be bylaw changes to even make those commercial businesses customers of the city of Lacombe for solid waste services.
Yeah,
There are many that aren't customers at all. We don't give them a bill at all.
But if they are a customer of the city, and if they just put it in proportionally to, if they're not getting waste picked up by the city of Lacombe, obviously somebody else is doing it, then could it be included on their billing, just a fee for the transfer station to cover off the funds that we've lost as we lose those customers? Because our total cost is not just the transfer station, it's also transportation out there for that commercial garbage. Is that not correct?
Yeah, of course, our staff, trucks, everything else that go with the collection side. So certainly to say we would charge a fixed fee based on the disposal cost, but there would be no quote unquote variable fee or like collections portion of that bill. Yeah, I mean, in concept, I think that would be possible.
Chief Gowdy?
Not just possible, it is in fact proposed concept change 2 of 3, is it not?
Is it?
Never end. And so that actually is what's discussed there. The issue that we ran into when we thought through that option was that you need to have some level of an understanding of what that business's solid waste disposal or collection needs are, because just going by the building type or the zoning isn't enough. And so what Director Thompson has proposed is that we would go out to some of those the commercial collectors within our community that are on our approved haulers list and request that information from them ahead of time so that we have an idea of how much collection is going on at the commercial businesses that the city is not collecting from.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Creasy. But we don't worry about weight now or how much they collect. Is that not correct? Like if you have a bin, you're charged so much for that bin, or you just charged collection for waste. Is that not right? On the commercial side, we don't weigh it. Like if you go to A&W, for example, you don't weigh their waste that we're picking up. So it's a flat rate now, is that not right?
So that is correct. It is a per tip fee. So with different businesses, we have a different number of bins on site, and then we collect them a given number of times in a week. And so there is not a weight-based system. It is a per bin collection system. And we would be looking for the same information from our commercial collectors if that's how they're charging. If they are charging based on weight, then we would look for that information instead.
Because we just want to recover the revenue that we're losing now. Is that not correct? Is one of the things on the commercial side? Because if we're down 40% on revenue on commercial, that's being made up by the residential side. And that's the unfair part. So I think that's an easy, something we could do. Put a fee on the commercial customers that are using commercial people for their waste collection, a fee to cover the transfer fees at the site that we're paying now.
So how do you envision us moving ahead on which one of these items were intended to pursue, not pursue, stress, major importance, not? Chief Gowdy? Or we wait and discuss that between the two Waste Commission members and Director Thompson and yourself, or how do you want to handle this?
I think that would be suitable, would be to discuss it to the side. Your insight as to what is possible or what isn't possible or what you think is likely to happen is going to be valuable for us to know which of the proposed changes are viable or which ones are really not even worth pursuing. So we wanted to make sure that the MGA, of course, requires that any information given to one member of council is given to all. So we wanted to make sure to share that information this evening in a format that allowed questions for those that have them. But certainly, I think that further discussion with Councillor Hibbs and Mayor Creasy is going to be really valuable as well to kind of hone in on which one of these advocacy positions you feel you can support and take forward on our behalf.
And for our purposes here, I think it's safe to say that all council is in favor of moving forward with any system that is both economical and more a more fair apportionment of costs to all the beneficiaries, whether it's commercial or residential. I think hopefully that's pretty obvious. I think that the weight-based system presents some significant challenges, both in infrastructure upgrades and in overall business outlined within the commission. So I think that one's going to be, nothing's impossible. That's going to be a tough one, I expect. That brought about on some deafening silence.
From my perspective, whatever you can do to reduce our costs would be terrific at the end of the day. So.
And there again, I'm not totally sold that anything that we do with these items is necessarily going to reduce our costs. It's going to move around where those costs are covered. So just to be clear with that, I think to expect a massive change in fees is not particularly realistic. But hopefully we can come up with a equitable way in saying that those that are benefiting from the service are paying, that everyone is paying their fair share, or as close to it as reasonable.
That's more like it's leveling the playing field,
Yeah.
so, right? Yeah.
I think when the whole idea of commercial vendors came about here in the city was for very good reason, both for some healthy competition with the city and to address those businesses that were not being adequately serviced because of the configuration, that type of thing. I don't think that it was ever brought forward or even realized at that point in time that it would have such significant impacts on the way that the commission requisitions its funds. Is that a fair statement, Councillor Clark?
Yeah, I would say that.
Director Thompson. What other information you need? Okay. Chief Gotti?
That's all we had for this evening.
Wonderful. Does anybody have anything further on any of the items that were discussed here? I think that we did go through our upcoming meetings. Councillor Ross.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor Creasy, but obviously our tipping fees from the Lacombe Regional Solid Waste Authority is basically cost of operations of the Solid Waste Authority in the first place. So the only way you lower them operational costs is if you have more tipping fee revenue from private contractors, correct? Which would reflect on the whole operational cost of the authority, which would then thus lower our tipping fees to our residents, correct?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
I think what was went over earlier is that we're looking at a way of altering who pays them, not necessarily in. It would certainly be our hope that they're lowered overall, but I don't know that that's particularly realistic from any of these recommendations. Certainly, that's something that is looked at continually at the commission levels. Is an effort to reduce costs, which are those benefits are passed on to users. This is a somewhat different item in my opinion, anyway. Anything that you'd like to add, Director Thompson, to that?
I mean, there is a complicating factor where you have the distinguishing between what's a member's contracted collector and what's a private hauler collecting for anyone else is difficult. You can have a certain company picking up for Memberville and then going to another area and picking up waste from a private house or something, and it like it's mixed. But no, I nothing else.
So with respect to next meetings, we've got here Monday, March the 8th is a regular council meeting at 5 p.m. And on March 12th, same thing, 5 p.m. And additionally, August 12th. So everybody's aware of those. If there's nothing further, one of the few motions that we do.
Where is she? She's up there. There she is.
Thanks, Mayor Creasy. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you very much. 8 o'clock.